Welcome to the Failed Podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the world of failure, exploring the stories and experiences of people who have failed and found success in unexpected ways. Each episode, we invite guests from various fields and backgrounds to share their personal stories of failure, discussing how they coped with setbacks and what they learned from their experiences, and how they ultimately turned failure into success. Through these conversations, we hope to inspire and motivate listeners to embrace failure as an essential part of learning and to view setbacks as an opportunity for growth and personal development. Thank you for tuning in as we explore the ups and downs of the human experience and discover the power of embracing failure. I am your host, Sam Esquivel, and now we want to welcome our guest, Jae Heredia from the Workoholic Podcast and the R.A.P Podcast. Some say the R.A.P Podcast. How you doing, my man? Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yes, you are the first person to pronounce that correctly. You know that, right?
Well, I am Mexican. No, well, my last name's Esquivel. So as far as like someone butchering my name, like I'm right there with you. It's difficult. Names don't follow rules.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so uncommon. There's no shade what I'm saying. There's a whole bunch of Gonzales and Gomez.
Yeah.
Those are very, very common. But Heredia, I've never met another Heredia. If we're not related. So that's why I was like, okay, I don't blame nobody else for butchering that name. But yeah.
I have to use my like Spanish speaking skills when I say, if I were to use my English part of my brain, I would have mispronounced it. So welcome, man. Thank you for coming
thank you
in.
For having me.
I've been watching you, dude. You've been making your rounds with all the podsters, with a few podsters here in the Fort Worth area. How you feeling? I know you've had a busy week. How you doing? How you feeling?
I feel great, man.
Yeah.
I really feel great. I didn't think I was going to be able to collaborate with anybody. I just thought it was, every man for themselves. But me and Johnny does an amazing job. Johnny is my co-host on the Rhythm and Poetry Podcast. He does an amazing job of communicating with other individuals. He's the social network person.
Got it.
Behind the scenes. He knows how to communicate very well, and he got us on Tales of a Fort, so shout outs to them for having us on. And I was like, you know what, this is a lot of fun. We should start collaborating with more individuals. That way the people that we know can go listen to their podcast and vice versa. And sure enough, I'm pretty sure I got them some new listeners.
Yeah,
which is always amazing. And I do it with music too. It's always fun putting people on to new things to enjoy. And then it started with Tales from the Fort. And then we went to Thanks for the Invite, which is a fun podcast. I told them on there, and I told you as well. Mm-hmm. They're the reasons that I started podcasting again.
Yeah, that's great, man.
We'll talk about that later, or we'll see. But I did podcast in the past, and then I just gave up because I was like, I gotta
pause you, man. You jumping ahead.
Yeah.
Here at the Failed Podcast, I never want to be rude, but I do interrupt only because I like to get off of the main road, and people, when they share their stories, they stay on the main road because it's an autopilot type thing. So we're gonna kind of talk about your journey, but before we start, I just want to give you some flowers. Here on the air, I like to do it to kind of train people on how to get compliments. Like, you don't have to wait till someone passes away. That's the whole background behind giving someone flowers. I caught wind of you not too long ago. Like, as far as the Workoholic Podcast, you've been on that for a minute. Y'all been putting some work in there, but I caught wind of you in the R.A.P Podcast. And how many episodes in? Like 20 or something?
For the Rhythm Poetry? Mm-hmm. I want to say we're going on 15.
15, yeah. So it's not a lot.
It's fairly new. We started it at December of last year.
Got it. But it's got a good rhythm. And so I forgot how I stumbled across it. but I listened to you, and just the way that you communicate, it caught my attention. Like sometimes it's the subject matter, sometimes it's the host, co-hosters, they make you laugh. There's many reasons why I like pick a podcast and I like it, but for you, it was the way that you communicate, just the way that the banter, the back and forth, the way you use certain words when you're communicating with it's Jay, it's you, and what's your co-host name?
Johnny.
With Johnny, I thought you were Johnny at first and he was Jay, so it's very confusing for me. So with the way that y'all go back and forth, I just liked it. Like you can't train the way that you communicate. There's certain things that you tell people communicate like this and like that, but for you, as far as from my perspective, it's natural. Like you just do it naturally. It's the way it reflects your character, and I just enjoy it. And I told a few people, this dude, he just communicates a certain way, and I really like it. And so because of that, I've been keeping up, and watching everything that you're doing, and I've been enjoying it, bro.
Well,
so
I appreciate
keep it
that.
up. Stay tuned, everyone. If you're watching. In the description below, I'll put all the links. I don't like to waste too much time with that because all you got to do is click right underneath and you can check out everywhere he's been and what he's doing with his 2 projects. Busy man, but we're going to go ahead and put what you're doing now on pause. We'll get there towards the end. I like to start out with the beginning of your life, okay? So we're gonna go back to the future, and I want to know a little bit about your childhood, right? Where you grew up. Describe your house and your neighborhood, and like the environment that you grew up. You can go back all the way to elementary, middle school. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I didn't know it at the time, but I grew up in a very poor neighborhood, but. At those times when you're little, you don't know what's going on. You just think the world is yours, and you don't think nothing of it. Looking back on it, I'm amazed on how far we made it with how little we did have. Yeah. So my dad came to this country at the age of, I want to say 15 or 16. Wow. He's one of those two. He's very, very, very young. He left an abusive household, and he decided to go make a life for himself over here in this country. And so he snuck his way in, and then did everything correctly so he could come in and out of the country as he pleases. And these were much simpler times, so it wasn't as difficult. But he would go back and forth, and that's how he met my mom. He met my mom. I mean, they grew up in the same village.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you know what? Let's set your papers up. Let's get you going over there. Let's live a better life. And then they did that for a while, and then they just stayed over here. There was better work opportunity. My dad was able to come up from 15-year-old kid who had absolutely nothing to making a little come up, and on the come up, that's when I was born. So, like I said, I didn't know any better. I thought we were doing amazing in life.
Now, let me ask you this, because you say poor, and a lot of people use that term, and they say, I grew up poor, and then you look at their photos, and then they vacation. You're like, you went skiing, bro? Like, you were on a lake? Like, people have the misunderstanding of what poor is, and so I wanted to ask you to describe it from a certain perspective.
For sure.
But hold on, let me set it up for you. Shoes, I know that you like shoes. Shoes represent a lot.
Right away.
Yeah, I know, right? Boom, right? I don't even want to see your closet, bro. But shoes say a lot about an individual, okay? So looking back at the individual that you're describing that grew up poor, your family was humble, but always striving for more. Don't get it twisted. Always striving for better, always striving for growth. But when you look at the shoes that you're wearing today, how does it make you reflect on you in the past, on your parents in the past? And because these are $350, man, in the gray market, you know what I'm saying, the secondary market, and they're hard to get, but you're wearing them, you're walking around in them comfortably and confidently. Tell me how that
is a great question.
In the past,
that is a great question, and the reason it's a great question is because I often think about this. It may sound a little cheesy, but I remember, I think this was middle school or in between middle school and high school freshman year, I always loved shoes. I don't know what made me fall in love with shoes. I have an idea. And I think it was because of a family friend. He always had a nice collection, but I always wanted shoes. And I remember I had to stick with the same shoes for about 3 years. And I remember my toes really hurting, and that's why we didn't have it all. And so when I finally got a pair of shoes from Kohl's, which was like $40, I thought the world. And I always make purchases like to this day in memory of, oh man, my younger self would have really loved this.
Yeah.
Like I'm also a big nerd, so I collect Yu-Gi-Oh cards and little trinkets like little comic books and comic book things for my younger self. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but literally it's like to be like, I wish I could go back in time and share this with my younger self because I wasn't able to enjoy it. And I say we grew up poor. I think around the time that my brother was born, which is like 4 years after I was born, we were living in, like I said, I hardly remember this, but my mom always tells stories to remind me of where we came from. We were living in someone else's garage. I don't remember whose.
Yeah.
But it was just a way for my dad to just keep working. That way they could save up for a house. And my mom, she was very timid. She was very shy. I don't want to say a weak person, but it came with some family abuse because of it.
Being new, language, all those things.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And so she was always trying to push my dad to do great things, and my dad was okay with settling with living in a garage. But because of my mom, we were able to get my dad out of his comfort shell and go out into the world and work hard and get a house. And so I remember that from it's a core memory of mine of like how hard my dad was able to work to get us out from a garage into an actual house.
Yeah.
So, and even then, the house was, I still thought of it as a palace, but it's a regular old house. It wasn't a bad neighborhood at the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't care about the neighborhood. I cared about what happened within the household itself, and that work ethic always stayed in the back of my house and in the back of my mind. I mean, and I just worked hard for everything that I ever wanted. And it's easy to do it when you're on your own, but when you have a family, it's like, holy crap, how did my dad do this?
Absolutely.
I was
the same.
There was times where, I mean, we had our high moments. Like my dad would make. There was a point in time where I think it may have been in my early teens where he was making a lot of money and we were finally doing good for ourselves, and out of nowhere, it just cut off and dried out. And in the middle of renovations of the house, they just came and there was a little story with some contractors that came and took my dad's money and said that they were going to do the job, and they just disappeared. So it looked like literally we were living in Mexico. I say that because my family in Mexico, they have these cement floors and there's drywall peeling off of the floor. It was just in the middle of a renovation, and we just didn't have the money to fix it, and it just stayed that way for the longest.
Yeah.
So, but
well, let me jump in.
Yeah.
So whenever I was young, I had people around me that had nice stuff, nice shoes. I knew there was a difference, and we grew up poor as well. And I just remember asking my dad or my mom for shoes that were expensive back then. They're $100, $120 back then was like the top notch of shoes. And I just remember, man, what was wrong with me, like asking my parents for those shoes when I knew that it was a big percentage of the money they had.
Did you know?
No, I didn't know, but they would do. I didn't get everything that I wanted, but whenever I remember getting those shoes, I had no idea what I was asking of my parents and the sacrifice that were behind those pair of shoes. And I would wear them and I wouldn't really care for them. They wouldn't even matter to me. And it's funny that it just goes away. Like the appreciation for something when you're young, it just goes away super fast. But the desire of wanting stuff is so high. Like to me, it doesn't match up, right? And so I see you, wearing your shoes, and then you're telling me how you grew up, and it's just crazy how fast time flies, and it's hard to look back. And that's why I love storytelling, because there's so much that we can share with people. Right now, there's some kids right now that are growing up and they don't have a lot of money and their parents are struggling and they're looking, and, you know, I'm not trying to sound big-headed, but they're looking at your shoes, they're looking at my shoes, and they're saying, man, they're so lucky. But really, they're lucky in the position that they're in. They're lucky in the experience that they're going to gain. And that's where I think that's where you came from, right? What defines you more than anything is your upbringing. And I love that. And every day we walk around in the shoes and the shirts and stuff that we like. And we're kind of saying like, hey, I'm not broke anymore. But deep down inside, man, our past defines us more than what we wear and how we look.
No, for sure. Actually, I can tell you the very first toy my dad ever bought me. I'm not saying I didn't have toys growing up. I really did. We used to go to a flea market and we would buy like a bag of toys. And it was like all random stuff. There was like a G.I. Joe next to a little Trolls. It was like a random bag of toys for like $3. And my dad would get us one every other month. And I remember there was a toy I really, really loved. This show called Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was little. And it was a Yu-Gi-Oh! Toy. And it was the very first toy my dad ever bought me at a Walmart. And I remember how old I was. I remember how much it costed.
Wow.
I was like, I'm scared to ask my dad because I was like, there's no way, dude. It's like $25-$30.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'm not gonna get that. But I asked either way, and he got it for me. And I was like, I remember feeling so shocked and surprised and happy, and like a $30 toy now. Like I think I spoiled my daughter a little too much because she doesn't have this. She doesn't have the same experiences that I do. Thank God. Not saying that poverty is an issue, but there was a lot of things tied to the poverty thing. But I mean, if she wants a toy, she's so used to hearing yes that there's no value in it anymore. So I remember that $30 toy. I kept it for years.
Yeah.
And it broke. I mean, we were kids. And funny enough, my brother for Christmas got me the exact same toy that was broken by my dad. And I cried like a baby. I remember I guess my brother didn't think that I was gonna appreciate it the way I did, but it meant more than just the toy itself.
Well, like nowadays I give so much to my daughter, but there's certain things that I give her that I'm like proud as a dad. I'm like, man, I just want to see her receive it, and I want to see how she reacts. And I just wonder if
look for the reactions.
And I just wonder if our dads felt that. Like I wonder if my dad, because he worked hard and I mean making hardly nothing back then. I wonder how he felt like saying, I want to give this to my son. You know what I mean? Because it's such a beautiful feeling to do that now. And I mean, again, it gets lost in a lot of things, but every now and then I'm just like, here you go, babe, I got you this. And I just watch her, and it's just a good feeling because you know that it was either difficult, it was expensive, and maybe you didn't get it when she wanted it at first. I just wonder how my dad felt, you know what I mean? And I'm very proud of my parents and what they've done. I'm sure you share in the same feeling.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Not to bring that toy up again, but so for the people who don't know, my dad has passed away last year. And that's why when I got the toy for Christmas, it meant more than what it should have. Mm-hmm. Because not only was it a toy that my dad first bought me, but it was also a reminder of my dad in general.
Yeah.
And I have it hanging over the Workoholic logo in my office. I don't know I forgot the camera angles that Johnny uses to record our clips, but you may get a glimpse of it in the background. But it means the world, not just because I was like, because I remember just how little we came from, and asking for a $30 toy was out of the question.
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
Today's nothing.
Yeah.
We're talking, how long back, you think?
I was, I want to say close to, definitely over 20 years ago.
Yeah, there you go. So
definitely. I want to say, let's say 24 years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, asking for that much for a toy is insane.
Now, rest in peace to your dad. I know that's not a difficult thing. A year's nothing. A year is still very, very fresh. So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to take you down this other path. Is that growing up, do you remember some important people in your life, like family members or friends, or someone that impacted you like in a positive way that you recall?
There's only one person that comes to mind. And he ended up being my godfather. Mm-hmm. So when I was young, I want to say around my 13 to 14 years, I was a little troublemaker. I was always hanging out with the wrong crowds. I was trying to become a gang member around that time. And this is when my cousins, we weren't close because they, it was an on and off relationship. They disappeared. We disappeared. I don't want to just blame it on them, but maybe it could be a us thing too. They were my older cousins. They came back into our lives, and they brought me back to church. I think my mom was really worried about me growing up in the wrong situation. She didn't want me to live that type of life because I do have a family history of gang members. So she was like, I don't want him to go down that route. So my cousins took me to church, and I think, when they took me to church, I met this man, and his name is Paul, and I think about it now. He tells me stories of every time we bring it up very often. He tells me how intimidated I was. He said I was scary looking because I go to a church and everybody's happy and everybody's jolly, and here comes this one kid just wearing red Dickies and big old clothes and slits on his eyebrows, and he just looks mean and intimidating. And something in his head said, go shake his hand, and something about him just captivated me. I was like, he didn't care about what I looked like. He didn't.
Yeah.
So it was just something so little, but over time, he took me under his wing, and he's provided a life for me that I would have never captured. Blood couldn't make us any closer. My godfather, with no exaggeration, I could say that he saved my life a couple of times.
Well, growing up, right, here on the Failed Podcast, we talk about failures and challenges. And a lot of people, they don't have good people in their lives. But the moment that person comes in, whether it be a mentor, just a positive figure, a teacher, a principal, it can redirect someone. And I love that he's still in your life, that he's impacted you in a way that still affects you today. What do you hope to pass on to someone else? Like if you see a kid walk in, or you talk to you and he's a bit rough around the edges, what are some good mentor like suggestions to pour into someone that your godfather taught you?
I definitely look past the exterior. Mm-hmm. I learned, especially at that young age, everybody's putting up a front. I don't think anybody knows who they are. And especially if you want to mentor someone young and you want them on the right tracks, just approach them. Yeah, if you're just, I mean, I get it. Everybody goes by, the whole don't judge a book by its cover. But sometimes that isn't good enough. I think if it wasn't for him, if he didn't just ignore what I looked like and just didn't shake my hand, I don't know where I would have been, because I honestly went to church and this was like, it wasn't church, it was like for the youth.
Yeah.
And this was like for like the youth to get closer to God. And truth be told, I would have been like, I'm only here for a couple of times. After that, I'm gone. Like there's nothing here for me.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for that man to come and approach me and give me a hug, and I thought it was weird that, after we first met, that he hugged me, but it stayed with me. I'm not doing the story justice, but it really, because I was like, why did he hug me? He didn't know me.
Yeah.
And it really messed with me. And I was like, did he see something in me that I can't even see? That kept me going back. Not so much the God part, even though I never told nobody that. But it was a positive environment that I really enjoyed. Yeah. It was something different. All I knew was all I knew. So, I mean, all I knew was gangbangers and people who were into
drugs, drinking, getting in trouble,
robbing. I mean, I remember at this time, I had a homeboy who was literally setting up a blueprint to steal, to rob a pawn shop, and God knows where I would have been if
it would have been a good plan.
Yeah.
You would have been like, that's pretty good. It's about 90%. We're going to get away. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's go. No, but
and then you look at the guy, you're like, wait a minute, he came up. Never mind.
But it's amazing to me, like, how it put a barrier in my head that said, hey, just keep going to church real quick.
Yeah.
Needless to say, homeboy's in jail. But like I grew up thinking that either if your friends are either in jail, dead, or they don't exist, and that's a horrible mentality for a young teenager.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Like I really thought I was a man at that age. Like, and then I look at the age that I'm at now, and then I look at who at the ages now. I'm like, I was once that age. Oh my God, I was a baby.
Now you look back. We're saying, don't judge a book by its cover and all. And we try not to be judgmental, right? But if I look back at myself, I'm like, Sam, you were an idiot. Like, you were stuck on dumb. Like, you lucky that you're here. When you look back at yourself, like, is it funny? Does it make you laugh? You're like, what was I thinking?
I want to say it concerned me more than it made me laugh, because I was like, my kids are gonna have to go through this.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad, he with all the errors that he had, he was a very abusive and alcoholic person. But for some reason I couldn't hate him.
Yeah.
He did all these wrong things to me and my family, but something in my heart just said, you can't hate this man no matter what. But I look at those times and I'm like, where did we stray off? Like, where did everything not go wrong? But what caused this for me to go this direction? Because I was always in the back of my head, I was still thinking I was a good kid.
Yeah.
I was like, even if I'm hanging out with these kids, I'm still a good kid. But the law wouldn't have seen it that way. Society wouldn't have seen it that way. It's just you're growing up in those environments, and sometimes that's all you have. I look back and I'm like, man, I could have really got myself in trouble. I could have really screwed up here. I really could have probably died somewhere else at a really young age. It's just these kids are so struck on impressing the wrong individuals that they're willing to put their lives on the line. And I can't talk down on it because I was that one individual too.
What are some of the valuable lessons that, looking back, that your dad has given you, that you say, I'm going to hold on to this, even with all the stuff that, drinking and abuse that he had, he was still a person. You were still his son. What did he give you that you're going to use or remember for the rest of your life? And the reason I ask is because there's no human that's a complete waste, no matter how bad they are, right? And so what's something that your dad taught you that you want to pass on to your kids that you use daily?
I don't think he taught me anything on purpose. It was just kind of observing him as a human being that was like, oh my God. I remember I was probably 15 or 14. Obviously, the young teenage lives kind of blur together because it was all a mess. But I was at the age of 14 or 15 when I first saw my dad cry. And that threw me off because I didn't even know he could. He was such a hard shell person. He was very rough. The only emotion that I knew him for was anger. And so when I saw him cry, it messed with me because I was like, shit, what is going on in his head that's making him cry?
Yeah.
And I won't say I didn't take it serious, but I didn't know what to do with it. And all of that was from so many years of dehumanizing my dad because all I knew him was for anger and for enraging and for being an alcoholic. And I think that's what I learned from him is like, hey, humanize yourself. Don't be afraid to show your emotion. Yeah. Showing your emotion is not a weak thing. I think we live in, not to butcher this term, but we live in a society that doesn't allow men to have feelings, to to feel vulnerable is sometimes seen as such a, what's the terminology? It seems weak for a man.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to break that stereotype. I tell people often, hey, I'm not feeling so well. My mental health isn't doing so. I want people to know where I'm at, so it's not a surprise whenever if I were to break down or something, because I'm dealing with a lot of emotions. But that's one thing that my dad like taught me without teaching me is like, don't dehumanize yourself for so long, because like I said, he's my dad. I've known him for 15 years because I'm 15 at the time, and I've never seen him cry, so I didn't know how to act.
Yeah.
So, it's just teaching my kids, teaching everybody that I know around me. Hey, speak up. Tell me how you feel. That way, I know how to approach you. That way, you don't become so isolated for the rest of your life, and nobody knows how to come to you because you never shared this part of you.
And mental health is such a big topic right now, and it's true for the machismo culture. It's tough to understand, and so if you're watching, it's basically be honest with the way that you feel. Like that's one of the first steps in having, like, in being healthy mentally is, and my dad's the same. It sounds like the same as your dad. Like I never saw my dad emotional. All I knew is that he worked long hours. We barely saw him. He was really strict. And I imagined that he was really tired. It wasn't till later in my life, once my dad became a grandfather, that I started seeing a change in him, and he started softening up. And I just wonder, man, all those years that we lost, like I had a good dad, but he was absent in so many ways, and so he again taught me, but didn't teach me. And I want to be present for my kid, and so that's a hard thing for our old school dads, And I'm glad that you captured that, and you're trying to change the path that you're going down now in fatherhood. Failure it's going to happen in life. Can you share an experience of failure in your life that ended up being a turning point for you? What did you learn from that experience, and how did you use it to grow and improve?
That's a loaded question.
It is.
I don't even know where to start. I really don't.
Well, we can touch on. Obviously the last two pods you have. They're doing really good. People are taking them really well. They're very entertaining, and then and I'll enjoy listening to them. But you told me you've had several podcasts going back, 5-6 years. And let's just call it, right? The first few have failed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Miserably.
Yeah. So let's start there, and what you've learned from those failures, and how it's made you better, and what you've learned from that.
Oh man. Okay. If we're gonna start there, there's a lot to be said. So I want to say around 2014, 2015, I started up my very first podcast. It was called The Uncensored Minds. And at this time,
great name, by the way.
Oh, thank you. At this time, I was a really big podcast head. Like I would listen to as many podcasts as I would. I worked in a warehouse where we had the luxury of having headphones in while we worked, and we worked 12 to 14 hours. So that was plenty of time to catch up on a lot of podcasts. And this is daily, so I was able to listen to so much at one time. And I was like, I want to start a podcast. Like the ones that I was listening to were very informing. They were educational. I don't think we got some of the podcast styles that we do now back then, but they were entertaining, and I was able to learn a lot from them. So I wanted to start an educational one, and it was just like one. I remember Uncensored Minds was going to be more of a educational one. I wanted to teach people on history and addiction and stuff like that. And the mistake that I made was thinking that anybody who shared a little bit of interest will work as hard as you. That's not a them problem. That was a me problem. I always put people to a standard where I would put myself.
Got it.
I'm always thinking, hey, this guy's going to work just as hard as I am. And it's nothing on them. That the term workaholic popped up for a reason. I worked hard on everything that I did. And to somebody who was like, hey, this is just, I'll pop up on an episode. I'm like, well, how about becoming a co-host?
Yeah.
And it was hard to find a co-host. I couldn't find a co-host to save my life. Johnny at this time, we were friends at that time, but he at that time he was a very, very shy person. So getting him out of his shell was hard back then. We had to know each other for a little longer for that to happen. And I just couldn't. It was an issue of finding a co-host. And there was even times where I was on a podcast talking to myself. I was like, "Oh man, this is bad."
Yeah.
But I still posted it out there just in case. And I don't know how many people will listen. I never wanted to look at the numbers because I didn't want to be like, "Dude, no one's listening to you. Just stop." But at the end, I was like, "This is becoming hard."
What were some of the subjects that you covered during that podcast?
So I remember one of the very first subjects was addiction to cell phones. And it was me, and I had a friend at the time. His name was Shantez. Shout out to Shantez, wherever you are now. He was on the podcast too, and we were talking about addictions to cell phones and what addiction to your cell phone does to the brain, what it does to on a biological standpoint. Yeah. So it was a very fascinating topic, and they always last about an hour long. We would goof off at the same time, but like we would try to stick to a script. And even though it was fun for the time, he didn't see himself doing it over and over again, especially not every week. So I was like, well, how about we do it once a month? And then even then, once a month was hard. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you know what? If I put a podcast out once a month, there's no...
Can't create momentum.
Yeah, there's no momentum. So I was like, you know what? I give up. And I really thought I gave up.
Now tell me how high your hopes were when you were rolling and you had the co-host and you were, yeah, this is gonna be good, and you're preparing your notes, and it's like you're gonna make it, right? But at some point you start seeing that this is not gonna work, man. Like that's a hard realization for people to come to say not only do I suck maybe, or I'm about to fail, but then you have to turn that switch off and then do something.
It was hard.
How was that? How did you handle that?
I don't think I handled it well. I blamed everybody else. I looking at it now. I know it was my fault. It was a me issue, but I was like, man, no, you know, I was like, I don't have any real friends. Nobody's willing to do this with me. I gotta do all the work. Yada yada yada. And that's just not true. You know, your passions are your passions, and you can't hold people to, hey, they're not being as passionate as you, they're not working as hard as you. I would work an entire week worth of notes, and I loved being on the computer. I was just typing up stuff, typing up notes, all different types of links. So when I pulled up my cell phone, everything was right there and then, and I was just so proud of that. And when I would share those notes to somebody else, they're like, oh dude, I don't want to read all that. I'm like, that hurt because I was like, I put in so much work and effort. Yeah. It's like, all right, like, and then it was always different people every single time. And it just, at that time, podcast wasn't such a big thing, so nobody wanted to be on one. And I was like, you know what? I give up. Like, there's no one in my... this was the mistake that I made, was thinking that no one in my town would be able to do podcasts because we're not California, we're not Hollywood, or we're not New York, where all the big Hollywood hip-hop podcasters are. So I was like, oh, we're just in Texas. Like, who's going to want to do it in Texas? Yeah. And years down the road is when I saw Thanks for the Invite, and I was like, oh, they're in my neck of the woods. Yeah. Like, they're doing it. They have a whole team. I was like, what's stopping me?
So let me ask you this. Okay, so whenever you were on your first pod, you obviously, were you married back then?
Yes.
Okay, so you had people, you had your wife, you had people in your life, and you were selling this idea, like, I mean, this is my pod, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And then your language has to change once you fail, right? The language shift is so drastic, bro. Like, it's hard to go from, boy, this is it, to, I'm not doing it no more. How did you handle talking about it after you said, this failed, I got to move on?
I don't think I handled it well at all. Like I said, I was a little bitter with everybody else. I was like, "Oh, come on, man! Like you can't even do it for me." But I realized how, like, not just now, but like a few years later, I realized how much I was asking of people.
Yeah.
To me, I didn't think it was much because I was like, "These are my goals. These are my dreams. I want to do a podcast, and I want to be known for doing podcasts." And I was like, oh, yeah, that's actually a pretty big thing to do. Like, how much commitment could you have towards someone else? Like, I wanted them to have the same commitment towards me the way I had the same commitment towards me. And I was asking for an arm and a leg, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So I didn't handle it very well. I stayed to myself for the longest. And I just thought it was the world versus me thing. And once I realized that it was me, I was asking for too much. I kind of humbled myself a little, and I was like, "Oh, dude, I don't know what I was thinking, asking for this and that." So I was like, "You know what? Maybe podcasting isn't for me. I always just thought I needed to find another individual who just wanted to work as hard as me, and that's not even the case either. We just have to either our goals have to align, or we all gotta want the same thing. But no one has to work as hard as me. No one has to overdo me. It's just." As long as we're on the same path, I should be happy with that.
You know, I think about like this is see if you come with me. I think of bacon and eggs, okay? And bacon is not so good, right? But bacon and eggs is two different things, two different animals, two different things. But boy, when you put them together,
it works.
Man, it's good.
Yep.
But they're never the bacon's never going to be the egg, and the egg's never going to be the bacon. And so
that's a great way to put it.
And so, like, you got bacon and eggs, man, on the R.A.P Podcast. You know what I'm saying? And so, I just wanted to throw it out there because people are watching, dude, and they're thinking, man, I failed, and they may never do it again. When people fail, they quit. Their confidence is low. They try to find another avenue, either not to face their weaknesses or they just say, I'm never going to try this again because it was so embarrassing. But you fell off the horse, but you got back on. How long was that gap whenever you said, I'm done with this?
Quite a gap. I want to say maybe, well, actually, it ain't that big of a gap that I thought it was. I think it was like 4 years.
4 years. The creative you existed in the podcast, and then the creative you existed during those 4 years before you got the Workaholics and the R.A.P Podcast to kind of put that back out into the world, right?
Yeah.
So how did you deal with having that creativity in you, but not having an avenue to kind of put it out there?
I don't want to pat myself too much on the back, but I am a very talented individual. I've been told my whole entire life, so to me it was nothing. I just felt like it was background noise. You're talented. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but at that time I was also doing videos. I was drawing. I don't draw more anymore, but I used to be so good with drawing, so I would display my art elsewhere. I would find other ways to channel some of my talent. I think I was still doing music at this time, like little freestyles here and there. We'd go into a recording booth and I just keep it for myself. So there was other avenues of me just using talents, but it was never the ones that I wanted to exercise or flex. I may have enjoyed doing music, but I was like, I didn't think I was going to do anything with music. I just like doing it for doing it. And who knows if I would have actually had the mentality to be like, nah, stick with this, where that could have gone. But I just knew I knew what I wanted to do.
So you used to rap?
Yeah, I used to rap.
You got any bars on the top of your head right now?
Not at the moment. I'm pretty sure if I look down my phone, I'll probably have one or two.
Yeah, I just wonder, because whenever we have a gift or talent, our mind, it constantly thinks down that rhythm. So that one is silenced now, and it seems like the communication one is stronger, right? Like doing the pods, that's the one that's at the tip of your tongue now.
Yeah, like
you couldn't just bust a flow like you would back then.
I need a beer in me at least. You know what I'm saying? But and funny enough, there was a video during this time where I wasn't doing the podcast, in those 4 years, we went down to, I forgot what restaurant it was, but a couple of buddies of mine, we went over there, we had a beer, we had some wings, and everybody was feeling good, and then we just started freestyling. And there's like a whole minute of me just freestyling, just drinking beer. It was fun. It was fun moments, but everybody was like, dang, I didn't know Jay can rap like that. I didn't know Jay can rap like that. I was like, come on, man, I do this. But like I said, I didn't. That wasn't a must. I wanted to flex. Yeah. I enjoyed making music. I enjoyed making music for the music alone. At that time, when I was making music with other individuals, they were just so focused on getting recognized. I wanted to just be known for, hey, this dude really liked making music, and I was a little ahead of my time because I was also making music when I was in high school.
Yeah,
and everybody kept on telling me, oh, I like your style. Like, I've never heard that style. Now it's like heard everywhere. My style was more melodies with rap, and it was just like singing and rapping at the same time. Now it's not uncommon, but it was something that I was like, oh, I was ahead of the curve on that. Like, I knew that was going to be a popular thing.
Well, let me stop. Let me jump in. A lot of people struggle in finding their meaning and purpose in their lives, right? And you've said that a lot of people said you're talented, you're gifted. You've heard that all your life. How have you navigated that, and how do you feel about your purpose, and what are you doing to continually pursue it?
I don't know. Like, I've had this conversation with you a week ago. I don't really have a plan for anything. I just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
The only thing I have plans for is podcasting, because that requires scheduling and stuff like that. But even then, for the podcast, I don't have an ultimate goal. It's just, to tell you the truth, it's just me wanting to leave a mark on this earth. Mm-hmm. Like, dang, there's one individual left behind. There's so much art. There's one individual left music. There's one individual left his thoughts, the podcast. There's one individual left just so much behind that we were able to realize that. I mean, growing up in any school that I was, I had I mean, I didn't have to. But there's always a portrait of something that I did in every school. And to this day, I hear, like, because my godfather was on the board of the high school that I went to, he would go and say, hey, yeah, your portrait that you painted is still up. Mm. And I remember doing it for elementary school. Whenever we want to decorate something, they'd always call me in and say, hey, we need you to draw this. Everywhere I went, my art was somewhere. I even remember meeting this man by the name of Memo. He would do some of the murals down in Northside Fort Worth. And I did one of the murals inside the antique mall down there by the stockyards. And if you look hard enough, there'll be a big old Jay at the bottom of the painting. So one of my murals is up right now, and it's just an amazing feeling to just know that, hey, I did this. This is. Yeah. Have you ever seen on a train where it said so and so was here? Mm-hmm. Have you ever wondered why they said that?
Yeah.
It's just to say, hey, I was literally here. This is what I did at this moment in time. Like, I may disappear, but I'm hoping it's forever.
Now, let me stop here. Okay, so guys, if you're watching, I try to keep it to 45, but this boy communicates his thoughts, and I kind of I felt like that was going to happen. So this episode is going to be a little bit longer, and I hope that you're enjoying it. I am from here, and so we're going to keep going. I have a few more questions.
I thought I wasn't doing myself justice at all. I'm like, oh,
yeah, you're doing good, man. But I'm going to jump in. I believe that one of your skills and talents is communication. Do you agree? Yes or no?
I agree.
Agree. Okay. I feel like, from my perspective, from listening to your stuff and your work and the way that you do it, it's just like a natural talent of yours. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about communication. And the first one is, what do you think are the most important skills to have when it comes to effective communication? And how have you developed those skills over time?
That is a great question. How did I develop? I think the way I communicate is I don't think I'm the most educated at all by any means. I don't think I'm bigger than he, but when I realized at a young age, I realized that
don't lose your train of thought. Okay, please. I don't think I'm bigger than he.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like a small phrase that you just threw out. And you do that a lot, bro, like in your pod. And I'm listening, and I'm like, man, that's great. Like, there's certain way, like, to not sound like no one else, you got to have these unique little phrases. And I'm not bigger than he, it, to me, is one of them. And you do that so good, man, that whenever I watch it, I have to say, I like it, but I have to erase it from my memory because I can't use it. But But I like it, and that's why I'm kind of want to dig a little bit in communication when it comes to
That's not the first time I hear that. I remember I have a buddy of mine. His name is Sam. He was listening to one of the podcasts for the first time, and he was like, "You said something on there that I really liked, and I don't remember what it was."
Yeah.
And we were going, and I was like, "Man," I remember I was like, "What episode were you listening to?" Because now it's bugging me that I don't know what phrase you like.
It's a spice in communication.
Yeah.
So if you in food, there's certain, like, people can make hamburgers a certain way for years, and then you come across a friend that says, add this, and they put this little spice on it, and it changes the whole game for that hamburger, right?
Yeah,
And so
sure.
I feel like you have all these spices whenever you communicate. I didn't mean to stop you, but go ahead and continue.
So, like I said, I never thought I was the biggest educated guy in the room, but I think I realized that at a young age. So what I did do is I strengthened my layman's terms, because everybody speaks in the layman's terms in a regular conversation. I don't think anyone's using high vocabulary words in a conversation. If you are, good for you. I just never met that person. So what I did is I strengthened my words. I try to paint pictures with my words. I think that's all it is. Words, to me, communication is our words. Our words are just noises that we make to communicate what's in our head. So how best can I get what image that I'm thinking in my head to your head is by painting these pictures. And by doing so, I use little phrases that like I said, it's not the first time that I hear about phrases captivating one. I think Sam was referring to a phrase, now that I'm thinking about it. I think it was a smart man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And he loved that. And and I don't know if he's never heard that saying before, but it's just the way that I talk. I use either some sort of quote, some type of saying to get my message throughout to the listener or to the person I'm talking to, the person I'm sitting having a coffee with. It's just the best way in my head to paint that image in their head of what I'm trying to communicate to them, if that makes any sense.
In your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when communicating? It can be / podcasting, but communicating, and how can those mistakes be avoided? What have you done to continue to grow?
Asking questions. I realize when I communicate, I ask a lot of questions at the end. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Do you get what I mean? Like, I ask that not because it's a habit, but it's also like saying, because I've had conversations with other individuals and I didn't understand what they were saying, and they never gave me the chance to be like, hold on, repeat that again, or say that one more time. So when anybody says, you know what I mean, I take that quite literal. I'm like, hold on. No, I don't. So repeat yourself. And then we could further on communicating. A lot of it is just people are staying quiet because they're not wanting to have that conversation, or they're not wanting to be like, nah, I didn't understand what you meant. It's just like, all right, communication gets lost because if you're not with me from A to B, then where's this conversation really going? I was having a conversation the other day, and I was looking at their face and they weren't understanding what I was saying. So I asked, do you understand? You know what I mean? And they thought I was being offensive. But when I asked, do you understand? They're like, no, I don't. Are you saying this? I'm like, no. Yeah. And I'm grateful for them saying, like, not wanting to carry on the conversation, because they could have easily just left and like, that man was insulting me the entire time. It was just not asking questions or not communicating. Like, if you don't understand something, I don't care if you have to say five times, what? Mm-hmm. Just understand the communication. If you don't understand, then it's just poor communication skills at that point. Get your message throughout. Always ask questions. I think that's the one thing that could benefit everybody else communication.
Now, a lot of people, whenever it comes to communication, they struggle with sounding different and being a different person with different audiences, okay? And I've seen you on different platforms and different types of conversations, and we share in this similarity. Your voice is you, and you are your voice. You're confident in the way you communicate, in the way that you sound. Are you aware of that? And what have you done to continue to do that?
I personally don't think I'm that confident like as of right now, I'm not even exaggerating. Like, or I'm not just saying this to say this. I don't think I'm doing myself justice right now because these are great questions, and I was like, oh man, I don't think I prepared enough. But it's just we all have our own truths, and I think that's the only truth that we go. I think going from one platform to a platform, if you switch it up, and then you're not saying to you, then you're lost in translation. You're lost in who you are, and that's where people kind of get jumbled up a little bit. If I only know my story, I only know who I am. And if you're trying to be somebody else, that's an alter ego. You got to remember who your alter ego is. And I think we have alter egos when it comes to jobs, when it comes to friends, when it comes to circles of friends. But I try to incorporate myself as me to as much as possible. I may be in a professional setting, but I'm still me. I'm still going to be the one to crack jokes. I'm still going to be the goofy kid. I'm still going to use layman's terminology to get my point across.
And by the way, to my the people watching, Jay's a funny guy. I know you can't tell today.
No,
right? But
not at all.
Dude, I'm listening to you. You're so funny. You say something that I'm not even going to mention what you said. But last week when we had talked, boy, you had me laughing with one statement that you made.
Yeah, that conversation should not be put out.
but anyways,
not in this setting.
Your communication skills are solid, and the podcast proves it, and continue to develop it. And this is just an encouragement to someone who's out there to find their voice and just use it, to motivate others. And so I love it. We have a few more questions. They get a little bit deeper, but I think you have a good head on your shoulders. And I think I'm very interested to see what you're going to say about this. Okay. What do you think the key to living a fulfilling life is? And how do you define success and happiness? And what steps do you take to pursue those goals in your own life? Fulfillment and define success and happiness.
Oh, I'm gonna give you such a whack answer because I wanted. This could be an answer for just everybody out throughout, but I think I'm only gonna speak for me. Like I said, I can only speak for me, and success is my kids, man. I'm a parent now, and I don't know where I would have been. Truly, I could tell you my kids have saved my life because I really don't know where I would have been right now if I didn't have to grow up and force myself to be the man that I am today. Success for me is making sure my kids grow up in this world correctly. And I think every generation is going to face some difficulty. I know my dad's generation faced some difficulty. I face some difficulty, and my kids are going to face some difficulty. And I grew up thinking, oh man, I remember I grew up remembering I was so bitter about some things. I was like, oh, my kids are going to have it all. My kids are going to have it all. Mm. And then I had kids, and then I'm giving them all, and then I'm realizing, no. Give them what you didn't have. Give them what you needed, not what you didn't have material-wise. Mm. That's not what growing up means. So I was like, you know what? I didn't have that structure with God. My parents took me to church, but they thought the church was supposed to do it all. My parents were just supposed to teach me, and they just didn't about certain things. And so I go to my daughter, and I make sure that she's educated on the world. You would have thought, just based off the love that my mom gave me, that the world was going to be so beautiful, and it didn't set it up for that. Now I'm growing up, and this may be at the expense of my child's innocence, but I tell my daughter the world is not sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be hard. It's going to be brutal, and I have to prepare you for that. And that's not something the kid wants to hear, but it's going to be definitely that's something that she's going to need. Yeah. Especially with everybody not knowing who they are these days. That's a whole controversial issue on its own, but people are going to have the same issues that we had. We didn't know who we were in high school, and now it's times 10 now, and we have social media to thank for that. Social media is going to make everybody feel like, oh, everybody should be happy. I look at everybody's highlight reels. My life should be like this, and it's not. So now I have depression, and if you don't set up your kids for that, I don't know where your kids could, like I said, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know where my kids could end up. So I'm letting them know, hey, life is this way, life is that way. And that's my terminology for success. I just want them to be prepared for life, even if God were to take me away the next day. They know, hey, my dad taught me this, my dad taught me that.
That's good. I like it. You're a music head. Your podcast Rap is about music. You go in depth. You're very knowledgeable when it comes to music. So I wouldn't do you any justice, man, if I didn't ask you at least one question about hip hop or rap. It's a tough one, but let's just see where your head's at in this. Okay, what's your favorite rap or hip hop album of all time, and why?
I want to say that my favorite album, and you probably thought this was going to be a hard one for me, was the Carter 3 by Lil Wayne. I remember that, and I think it had so much significance in the time that I was growing up. A lot of my life is broken up into soundtracks for me, and I go back and I go listen to a lot of things that I was doing around the time. I remember 3-peat. I was playing basketball. A milli. I was working out. I remember my life in soundtracks, and I remember the Carter 3 being one of the biggest.
Carter 3 was
Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne?
Yeah. I remember that being one of the biggest parts of my life. It was definitely during a lot of hardships. And that's just album. We're not talking about music. We're just talking about albums. So it was definitely a very hip-hop based teenage life. This is when I was rapping too. I wanted to be the next Eminem. I wanted to be the crazy lyrical flow. I wanted to say the craziest punchlines, and I was all from Wayne. But yeah, a lot of it was the Carter 3.
Cool, man. I was listening to it the other day. It's a really, really good album. Here is your final question, okay? What is one piece of advice or a quote that has always motivated or inspired you, and what would you like to share with our listeners as a source of a positive thing or something inspirational to leave us with? This is your final thought.
That's a great one. If I were to say, and it's so funny that I got this from a movie, but it stuck with me. No amount of money has ever bought a second of time. I look back on my life and I'm thinking, man, I wish I could have spent more time here. I wish I could have acknowledged this person more here. Live in that moment. Live in the moment that you're currently living in. Don't think about the past. Don't think about the future. Be happy with where you are right now, because right now is not forever. Enjoy your kids. Enjoy your family. And so on.
Jay, my man, thank you so much for coming on the Feld Podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation, all your insight, and just keep it going, man. I'm enjoying what I'm seeing, and can't wait to see what the future holds for you and any project that you work in. You got my support, so thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man. It means a lot.
That's all for today's episode, and I hope that y'all enjoyed hearing Jay's story and how he has overcome challenges to find success in unexpected ways. Remember, failure is not something to be feared, but rather an opportunity to grow and self-discovery. Embrace it, learn from it, and use it as fuel to propel you towards your goals. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our channel, leave us a comment, and follow us on Instagram. And don't forget to share with a friend. Join us next time for more inspiring stories of failure and success on the Feld Podcast. And like I always say, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, my man.
Thank you.